Well, it's almost Halloween time again, and in the spirit of the spooky season, we have Five Nights at Freddy's, a movie I didn't know existed until a few days ago based on a video game that I've never played. So obviously, my excitement for this one was through the roof. Yeah, I wasn't planning to see this, had no real interest in seeing it. Also, it was dropping on Peacock the same day it released in theaters, and we all know what that usually means. But it got my attention when I saw a video about it, and I found out that the animatronic robots in the movie were made by the Jim Henson people. That was some dirty pool movie. So I decided to see it based on that alone, and then the more I thought about it, the more curious I got. I mean, video game adaptations have typically, not turned out so well, but they've been on kind of a redemption tour the last couple years with projects like Arcane, Castlevania, the Sonic movies, Super Mario Bros., The Last of Us. Being based on a video game is not a surefire bet that these things are gonna suck anymore. The odds probably still aren't great that they won't, but things have been heading in the right direction for a little while now. Besides, having never played the game myself, it's not like I'll know if they f*** up the adaptation. All I care about is whether it's a good movie. And I'll say this for it. There is nothing about this film that screams theatrical release. Even for a streaming movie, it feels like it was made on the cheap. It's very small scale. Most of it takes place either in a house or in an old rundown restaurant / arcade / Chuck E. Cheese knockoff, and beats the hell out of me why they released it at the end of October instead of the beginning. You figure that out. I don't know what kind of adaptation it is, although based on the gameplay footage I watched before I sat down to shoot this, I'm guessing fans of the games will find it super underwhelming. But all things considered, as someone who knows nothing about the games at all, I don't think this was that bad. The best thing about the movie is the robots. That Jim Henson touch was worth the money, and judging by everything else in the movie, I imagine that's where most of the money went. Not only are the robots refreshingly all practical creations, but they really do look and move like something you might see at an amusement park, and they shift pretty effectively between innocent and evil. All it takes is a little change in the facial animatronics and a change in the eye color, and that does the trick. Now, are these things gonna be frightening to an adult? No. But little kids, who are undoubtedly the target audience for this, yeah, they'll be creeped out. Also, there's kind of a weird retro charm about these robots. And the movie too, frankly. I wouldn't compare it to Stranger Things or anything on that level, but if you're a little sick of modern CG, which there's none of in this movie, and if you're a child of the 80s and 90s and you grew up with the Muppets and old school video arcades and stuff like that, there are some nostalgia buttons being pushed here. It reminded me of when I was a kid going to places like this. It might not be very cinematic, but it is charming in its own way. And if a movie can remind me of my childhood rather than violate it in ways that YouTube would strike this video down if I described, it should get some kudos. That's a feat a depressingly small number of films trying to play the nostalgia bait card manage to pull off these days. Now, as for the rest of it, I don't know how much of this was from the games and how much was original, but there's a story about this guy Mike who's struggling with PTSD and unresolved trauma because his younger brother was kidnapped years earlier, which he's never gotten over, and he's also taking care of his little sister and trying to keep custody of her so she doesn't end up living with their aunt, who is not very nice. So he takes a security gig to make ends meet and winds up getting sucked into a big thing with ghosts and evil robots and stuff. And that was actually more of a down-to-earth human element than I expected to get in a movie about animatronics that come to life and try to kill people. I appreciated that. It gives you a little something extra to care about in between the wackier scenes. Not all of it is done well, though. It's hinted that the aunt has bad intentions and is doing some underhanded things, but all that just kind of gets swept under the rug and forgotten about when the shit hits the fan, so it doesn't really go anywhere. That could have been done better. But the kidnapping story with the younger brother, that was surprisingly dark. It doesn't get too heavy or anything, but for a movie clearly aimed at kids, that's disturbing stuff. And not all of it is resolved happily either, because even a horror movie for a younger audience is still a horror movie, I guess, and I actually respected it for that. They earned some points for not using kid gloves on a movie for kids, at least not for the entire runtime. That took some guts, and it showed they were putting in a little effort to give the parents in the audience something to think about too. It never gets genuinely bone-chilling, or anything even close to that. In fact, there aren't any real scares in the movie at all, unless you scare really easily, again, made for kids. But there's enough enough of a story there about this guy being tormented by the kidnapping for all those years and trying to save his sister and just find some freaking peace that you sympathize with him. You feel for him and you want to see him get through this. It's nothing riveting, admittedly, but it held my interest. It'll keep you from falling asleep at least while the kids are having fun with the bright colors and shiny things, and that's honestly more than I expected from this. And it might just be because I hadn't played the games and had no expectations at all, and from the short bits of game footage I watched on YouTube, it doesn't even come close to measuring up visually, but still, I don't hate this movie. The story with the kidnapping and the guy and his sister is told well enough that adults won't be bored out of their minds, and kids will be entertained by the creepy robots even if they are on the clunky side. I wouldn't let super young kids watch it, but if you've got 10 to 12-year-olds who like being scared and are maybe wading into the horror genre for the first time, I could see them having enough fun with this that it's worth killing a few hours for a matinee. Even the PG-13 rating I thought was kind of ridiculous. There's no salty language, there's hardly any blood, there's some violence and a few dark-ish moments, but it's pretty safe. They usually cut away from the most violent bits except in one scene, and it's not like they show anything super gory. To me, the darkest part was the stuff about the kidnapping, which was more psychological than straight-up horror. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing original or ambitious or even impressive about this film. It was obviously made for very little money, aimed at a younger skewing audience, absolutely, and by modern horror standards, it's as tame as it gets. But for what they had to work with, which clearly was not very much, they didn't do too bad of a job. I don't know how fans of the games will feel about it, but just as a movie, I think it does what it set out to do. If you don't care about it, you're not gonna miss anything, and you certainly don't have to see it in theaters. But if you're looking for an inoffensive, family-friendly movie that leans into horror but not too hard to bring the kids to for Halloween instead of going trick-or-treating or whatever, you probably could do worse than Five Nights at Freddy's. Thanks so much for watching. Before you leave, don't forget to ding that bell icon and follow my social media so you can always be notified when I upload new stuff. The links are down there. And while you're still here, listen up. I'm trying to get over that last hump to 50,000 subscribers. But if I'm gonna do that, I need you to do all the other YouTube things. So hit that thumbs up, leave a comment, share the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and make sure you're still subscribed, because what really deserves to be terrorized by murderous, evil animatronic robots is the YouTube algorithm. That's all for now, but I'll be back with more soon. So take care, stay tuned, I'll see you next time. Happy Halloween!